Hello and welcome to the Author's Den. I'm your usual host, Mike Talley, but on today's show we're going to be doing something a little different. Bridget Smith is a Southfield second grader and has a popular blog called Bridget and the Books, where she reviews books and interviews authors. Bridget has said that her favorite author is Salina Yoon. Well, Salina Yoon has come to Southfield and will appear on the Author's Den today with special guest host Bridget Smith. Welcome to the Author's Den, a place where we encourage reading and writing, a place where you can meet authors and book illustrators, a place to get your questions answered about writing, publishing, and promoting your book.
Hello, my name is Bridget from Bridget and the Books, a blog about books. I'm here to interview Salina Yoon, a children's author and my favorite author. So Salina, tell me a little about yourself.
Oh boy, well, I'm a children's book author and illustrator, and I have written and illustrated over 160 books, including, I think, your favorite books, the Penguin series.
Yes, they are my favorite books.
Oh, thank you.
Did you read a lot when you were a kid?
You know, that's a really good question because I think a lot of kids assume that I read tons of books when I was a kid, which made me want to become an author-illustrator, but it was actually the opposite because when I came here to the United States, I came here from South Korea, and I didn't speak a word of English, and my parents couldn't read books to me either, and so we actually didn't have a lot of books at home at all, and the few books that we did have, I wasn't able to read them, so I would look at the pictures and I would make up stories by myself by looking at the pictures, and so that is how I got the interest in looking at books, and then that eventually helped me read the books as well.
You have written a lot of books. Is there a series you most enjoyed writing?
My favorite series is definitely the Penguin series, and that started with Penguin and Pinecone. And before Penguin and Pinecone, I actually didn't write stories. I created concept books, which may be books about shapes or colors or opposites. And Penguin and Pinecone was my first story that I wrote, and that was back in 2011. And the character of Penguin was inspired by my first son. His name is Max. When he was just 4 years old, he brought me a pine cone and asked me to cut a little blanket for it. And so I did, and he put it in a little box and took it up to his room to take care of. And I thought that that was such a sweet thing to do, that stayed with me. And 2 years later, when he was in first grade, I wrote the story of Penguin and Pinecone. And so that is my favorite series.
Where did you get your ideas?
Well, my ideas come from so many things. I think it's not from one place, but it's about keeping your mind open, and so that you can get ideas from everything. I'll get the best ideas when I'm doing absolutely nothing that seems productive. I like to enjoy things like walking, taking walks, taking hikes, sitting and reading, looking up in the clouds, playing with toys, playing with my kids. Even dreams have inspired book ideas, and so I'm always thinking about just being open-minded to things around me, and eventually I'll find an idea from that. Even from watching kids, observing my own kids, and a little bit of their interaction might inspire a whole story.
How do you make your characters? They're really interesting.
Thank you. Yes, I've had many different characters, from penguins to bears and ducks and porcupines, even a mime, which is kind of an interesting character because a lot of kids don't know what a mime is. Mimes aren't terribly popular, but for that particular story, it was a story based on my own life and my own feelings as a child when I felt like I didn't have a voice because I couldn't speak the language, so I actually was pretty silent. And so I thought a mime would be the perfect character to represent how I felt in feeling really different. And so I created the character of a boy mime. And even though I was the inspiration behind it, still in art form, it was a boy who was a mime.
I know all the books you just said. Do you have any advice for children's authors or people who want to be children's authors?
Absolutely. The best way to learn how to write and illustrate books is to read as many picture books as possible. And that's what I do, even as an author illustrator myself. Even when I feel stuck, the first thing I do is grab books off the library bookshelves and read a few books, and then that gets my ideas going again, which is why I actually work at the library a lot. Even though I have a studio at home, I drive out to my local library and spend a lot of time reading books and writing and sketching there.
So what led you to be an author?
It was the art. I loved children's art, and when I would look at picture books, and of course when I'm looking at picture books, there are words, and then of course it's a book, and I'm thinking, you know, I want to do this, but of course I can't just do the art. I have to have words with my pictures, and so that led to me writing my own stories.
Do you have a favorite blog?
I have a favorite blog, and that would be yours, Bridget. In fact, I remember when your mother told me that you want to start up a blog, and I remember telling all my friends about it, and all of my author friends were asking, who is this Bridget? You know, she's just awesome. I want her to review my books. And so you're actually quite a celebrity among my author friends. So I'm really proud of you. I'm so happy about your blog.
Your book was
Congratulations.
my first book I reviewed.
It sure was. I remember that. Thank you. Thank you for reviewing that book.
Do you have a favorite character you created?
Well, that would be Penguin because he was my favorite series, but I have actually a very new character that no one knows about because it hasn't been published yet, but I really like her a lot, and I often give the most attention to my most current character. I'm not even sure I can give her name yet. I told it to you, remember, in secret, and we have to keep that a secret until it actually comes out. But that character I told you about, I think she's my favorite for now.
What do you think you should make a new character in? What do you think the new character should be?
Well, I'm always open to creating new characters, and it depends on. All of my characters have one thing in common, though, even though they're all different. You know, they can be a bear, a mime, you know, a dinosaur. They could be all kinds of things. But one thing that they all have in common is that they're all very kind and loving, and they always put friendship first. And so even though my stories may vary, I feel like the running theme is always friendship and kindness.
Okay. So I'd like you to tell me how you make your books.
That is an interesting process because I go through lots and lots of different drafts, but I begin with brainstorming ideas and brainstorming character designs. So on a piece of paper, much like yours, I never draw on a really nice sketchbook because I want to feel like I can throw it away, that I'm not, that I don't have to make a perfect drawing. So I just use some scrap paper sometimes and start sketching out how I want the character to look or ideas. And then instead of just writing the story with words, what I do is I write the story with drawings, with sketches. And so I start storyboarding out the scenes. And so I think of the stories like a movie in my mind. And I think about the most important scenes in that movie and sketch out those scenes first. And after I lay those out, I will try to fill in the gaps so that they all make sense. And oftentimes I'll actually cut out the pieces of the storyboards, the rectangles that make up the pages of the books, so that I can move them around and see how best they fit together. So it's very hands-on, it looks very crafty. In my writing bag, I always have a pad of paper, scissors, and Scotch tape, because I do cut them out and piece them together and then replace pages when I need to. And then I stack them all back up in the proper page order to see if it reads well, and if it doesn't, then I replace pages. So it's very cut and paste. I really enjoy that process.
Do you have a favorite character to draw?
I think each new character is sort of a challenge. I hate to play favorites with my book characters because I love them all. You know, I love drawing the snakes that I shared today at school, the appa snakes, and even though it was just a book full of funny snakes, each one was really silly, and so you know, I really enjoy drawing all of them.
Do you have an author that you really like and that helped you start to write books?
Yes. Back when I was about 4 or 5, we had this book called Oh, What a Busy Day by Gayo Fujikawa. And there are a couple of reasons why I really loved that book. For one thing, it was a name that was Asian, and while that name is Japanese, and I'm actually from Korea, but it made me realize, like, wow, you know, Asian people can also be an author and illustrator, because I only saw mostly American names, or even like Dr. Seuss, that's not an American name, but I didn't see any Asian author illustrators before then, and so I thought that was really interesting. And the artwork in this particular book was so beautiful. Even though I couldn't read the words, it made me want to be able to do art like her. So that was one book that really influenced me and made me want to be an artist.
So how do you get ideas for your great covers?
That's a great question, because you know, book cover ideas, they often change. Even though I may have an idea for the cover of a book and even the title of the book, sometimes my publisher will tell me to change them. And so the covers will go through lots of revision processes. Like for example, Be a Friend. I know that you know that book, and on the cover, and you only know that book as Be a Friend, but you may not know that the original title of that book was called The Silent Adventures of Mime Boy. But my publisher actually asked me to change that title because they didn't think that kids would know what a mime was, and they thought, well, this book is about friendship, and that title doesn't tell that to the reader. So they said, can you come up with a title that is more reflective of the theme of the book? And the theme is friendship. So then we tried Boy Meets Girl, An Extraordinary Tale of Friendship. So that's a pretty long title. And so they said, no, it's a little bit long, and it sounds like a romance book. And so it was someone at the publishing house who suggested the title Be a Friend. And they said, what do you think of this? And I said, well, I think that's perfect. And so the title was actually approved as a group. So it wasn't one person saying it has to be this way, and it's not even me saying it has to be this way. So that's how that title came to be.
How long does it take to create a page?
Well, every book is different. I wish that each book was the same so I can know how long a book will take, but it will take between 1 to 4 days. I really try to limit it to about 2 days tops, because I have lots of pages to do for a book.
Okay. How long does it take to make a book?
To do a whole book, for my picture books, they are 40 pages, and so that's a lot of pages, and so that will usually take me about 6 weeks to 2 months to complete a book after all the sketches and the text have been approved. So just doing the final art will take me about 2 months, but writing it, revising it, and going back and forth with my editor, that might take several months. That might take about 3 to 5 months before I begin the final art.
Okay. How can kids learn more about you?
Well, kids can learn more about me through my website, which is salinayoon.com, and that is SALINAYOON.com. And another way that kids can access me is simply by writing me. And like you've done it before, Bridget, you can tweet something and just tag me, and I'll read it, and I never, ever ignore a tweet from a fan. I always respond, or at least like it. I will definitely read it. Most likely, I will write you back. So I encourage kids to reach out to their favorite authors, whether it's me or somebody else, but look for their website. They often have a contact information, an email, sometimes even an address that you could write a fan letter to, but I really encourage kids to connect with their favorite authors.
What tools do you use to create a book?
Well, that's a great question. I love creating art with lots and lots of mediums because it's fun, and I like to experiment. And I was trained as an artist. I went to art school, and so we learned how to work with lots of different mediums. So I don't actually stick with just one medium. My earlier books, I painted with acrylic paint, so using traditional brush on illustration board. I've used graphite pencil, which is just a pencil on paper, and that I would scan onto a computer and color in digitally. I mostly now use a Wacom tablet, which is a digital tablet with a stylus, and so whatever I make, whatever mark I make on my Wacom tablet, you could see directly on the computer screen. And so that's how I've illustrated my penguin series and bear series and duck-tailed porcupine. And I love that because if I make a mistake, I can easily erase it without getting a new board out. But still, it's very much hand-done because I'm still using a stylus that acts like my pencil. It just happens to be recording it in a digital way. So if you look at the style of my book, it's still very much hand-done, even though the computer assists me.
So, how did you get published?
So, in the very beginning, when I was creating books to try and sell to publishers, I really consider my first book this book called My Puppy. And that was sold to the Penguin Publishing Company, not to be confused with my Penguin book series. That's very different. And what I did was I had an idea for a book, and I illustrated it, I printed it on paper, and I built a book dummy. And a book dummy is like a prototype. It's a fake book that I put together, and I did all of the pages. I finished the whole book and mailed it over to Penguin Publishing. And at the time, you didn't need an agent to send off one of these book dummies. And every month or two, a bunch of interns at the publishing house would get together and open up the mail, the submissions, and go through them to see if any of them looked good enough for them to show it to their editors. And they call this the slush pile. The slush pile is a bunch of mail that is not solicited. That means an agent is not submitting this package to the publisher. Any random person could send out a submission to a publisher if they accept unsolicited submissions. And so Penguin Publishing did accept them, so I sent it off, not even to an editor that I knew, just a Dear Editor letter, and it was about 4 months. And I thought that it was a no because I didn't hear anything, but it took about 4 months for an intern to actually give me a phone call and say, you know what, this looks really interesting. My editor is very interested in talking to you about this series. And so that was my first big New York publishing house publishing deal, and it was for 8 books in this particular series. And so that's how I broke in. And now, you know, over 160 books later, I do have an agent. I got my agent about 5 years ago. And so for newer authors, if they're really serious, I highly recommend having a book agent to help you submit the books to the larger publishing houses.
I'm so glad you were here today. I look forward to seeing you again, Salina Yoon. Thank you.
You're welcome.